The blade stopped 3 inches from my throat. I didn't flinch. Couldn't afford to. The Valorian Royal Guards don't respect fear. They execute it. 6 of them surrounded me in the diplomatic corridor, their crystalline armor refracting the station's blue lighting into razor-sharp patterns across the walls. The one holding the energy blade to my neck had eyes like molten copper, unblinking, measuring whether I was worth the political incident my death would cause. Identification, she said. Not a question. A command. I raised my hand slowly, palms out. Captain Marcus Webb, Terran Diplomatic Corps. I have clearance for this sector. Your clearance expired 47 minutes ago. Her blade hummed closer. I felt the heat against my skin. You were instructed to remain in the human quarters. There's a child in Medical Bay 7, I said, keeping my voice level. Human child. 4 years old. She's alone and scared, and nobody told me I couldn't. Silence. The guard's free hand moved to her comm device. Medical Bay 7 is restricted. No humans are cleared for that sector. Explain your presence or I will assume hostile intent. My heart hammered, but I kept my breathing steady. Training. Years of it. Never show panic to a species that views emotional displays as weakness. I heard crying.
A child's voice. I followed standard humanitarian protocol.
There are no human children in Medical Bay 7. Then whose child is crying? The guard's eyes narrowed. For 3 seconds, neither of us moved. Then her comm device chirped, a sharp, urgent sound that made all 6 guards stiffen simultaneously. The blade at my throat withdrew. Exactly. 1 inch. The guard listened to something I couldn't hear through her Neuralink. Her expression shifted from cold authority to something I couldn't quite read. Confusion? Alarm? The Queen requests his presence, she said finally, and the other guards parted like a silver sea. I'd never met the Valorian Queen. Nobody human had, not in the 8 years since first contact. She ruled from the shadows of protocol and ceremony, a figure so remote that most diplomats questioned whether she actually existed or was just a convenient fiction the Valorian Council maintained for political leverage. The guards escorted me through corridors that grew progressively more ornate, walls of living crystal pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. The air smelled of ozone and something floral I couldn't identify. We passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each one scanning me with technology that made my teeth ache. Medical Bay 7's doors opened without a sound. The room beyond was vast, circular, and dominated by a single medical pod in the center. The pod was transparent, and inside, a Valorian child. Maybe 5 years old by their aging standards, though I wasn't certain. Her skin was the pale blue of deep glacial ice, marked with the intricate silver patterns that denoted royal bloodline. She was unconscious, suspended in some kind of gel medium, and her left side was covered in angry red scarring that looked disturbingly fresh. Standing beside the pod was a figure that made the air itself seem to bow. She was tall, even for a Valorian, 7 feet at least, with the same ice-blue skin as the child, but marked with patterns so elaborate they seemed to move in the light. Her eyes were silver without pupil or iris, yet I felt them focus on me with surgical precision. She wore robes that shifted color with each breath, and on her head sat a crown that appeared to be made of frozen starlight. The Queen. You may leave us, she said to the guards. Her voice was like wind through crystal caves, cold, clear, absolute. The guards hesitated. I saw it in the way the one who'd held a blade to my throat shifted her weight. But they obeyed, filing out until the massive doors sealed behind them with a sound like a coffin closing. I was alone with the most powerful being in Valorian space. Approach, the Queen commanded. I walked forward, every instinct screaming at me to measure each step, each breath. The child in the pod looked peaceful despite the scarring. Her small chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. You are the human who entered restricted space, the Queen said. Yes, Your Majesty. I apologize for the breach of protocol. You heard my daughter. She turned to face me fully, and the weight of her attention was like gravity increasing. You heard her distress and came. Why? The question felt like a trap. I chose honesty, because she's a child. Children shouldn't suffer alone. The Queen studied me for a long moment. Then she moved to the pod and placed one long-fingered hand against the transparent surface. 3 years ago, our diplomatic vessel was attacked by Crithian raiders near the border of your territory. Our ship was disabled, life support failing. My daughter was with me. She was 2 years old.
My mouth went dry. I remembered.
God, I remembered. A human ship responded to our distress call, the Queen continued. They boarded our vessel despite the danger. Crithian ships were still in the area. The humans had perhaps minutes before they would be detected and destroyed. They chose to evacuate our crew anyway. She turned to look at me again, and I saw something in those silver eyes that I'd never expected to see in a Valorian ruler. Recognition. There was fire, she said quietly. The ship's core was breaching. My daughter was trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead. The other humans were already at the airlock, but one came back. One human pulled burning metal aside with his bare hands and carried my daughter to safety. My right hand started to ache, the phantom pain of old burns. "Show me your hands," the Queen commanded. I hesitated, then extended both hands, palm up. The scars were still visible after 3 years. Shiny, twisted skin across my right palm and up my forearm where superheated metal had branded me permanently. The Queen reached out and grasped my scarred hand in hers. Her skin was cold, but her grip was gentle. She studied the scars with the intensity of someone reading a sacred text. "I never saw his face," she said. "Never learned his name." The humans departed before I could thank them. Before I could tell them that the child they saved was the heir to the Valorian throne. She released my hand and moved to the pod. With careful precision, she adjusted a control panel I hadn't noticed, and the gel medium began to drain. The child's eyes opened slowly, and she took her first breath of unfiltered air with a small gasp. "My daughter has been in medical stasis for 3 years," the Queen said. "Her injuries were severe. The burns, the trauma. Our medicine could heal her body, but her mind." She paused. "She has not spoken since that day. She screams in her sleep. She fears enclosed spaces. She cannot bear to be touched without warning." The child in the pod turned her head and looked directly at me. Her eyes were the same silver as her mother's, but clouded with something that made my chest tight. "Until 17 minutes ago," the Queen continued, "when our medical AI detected elevated neural activity, my daughter spoke her first words in 3 years. She said, 'The warm one is here. The one who carried me.'" The child sat up slowly, the medical gel sliding off her small form. She raised one hand and pressed it against the inside of the pod, and I understood what the Queen was asking before she spoke. "Would you allow her to see your scars?" the Queen asked, "so that she might know, truly, that she is safe?" I stepped forward and placed my scarred hand against the pod, where the child's hand rested on the other side. Through the transparent barrier, our palms aligned. The child's eyes widened. Then with painful slowness she smiled. And the Queen of the Valorian Empire, ruler of 100 worlds, bent her head and wept. The pod opened with a sound like breaking ice. The child didn't run to me. Valorians weren't built for such emotional displays, but she stood on uncertain legs and reached out one small hand. I knelt to meet her at eye level, and she touched my scarred palm with fingers that trembled.
"Warm,"
she whispered. Her voice was like small bells. "You were warm when everything was burning." "I remember you too," I said softly. "You were very brave." I was scared. Being brave means being scared and doing what you need to do anyway. These hurt you. For a little while. They're better now. Mine still hurt. She gestured to the scarring on her left side. "The doctors say the pain is in my mind." I glanced at the Queen, who stood perfectly still, watching. "Sometimes our minds hurt worse than our bodies," I said. "That's okay. It doesn't make the pain less real." The child considered this. Then, with a deliberation that seemed far too old for her small frame, she took my hand and placed it against the scars on her side. Even through the medical gown, I felt the raised tissue, the heat of still healing trauma. "When you touch them," she said, "they remember being saved instead of burning." My throat constricted. I looked up at the Queen, uncertain, and she gave the smallest nod. I kept my hand where the child had placed it. "You were the bravest person on that ship," I told her. "You didn't cry when I carried you. You held on tight and you trusted me. That's real courage." "I cry now," she admitted, "every night." "That's okay too. Crying is how we let the fear out so it doesn't stay trapped inside." She studied my face with unnerving intensity. "Will you stay?" I glanced at the Queen again. "My daughter asks a difficult question," the Queen said. "You have diplomatic duties, a life on Earth. We cannot simply... Please." The child's grip on my hand tightened. "Everything is dark and cold and quiet here." "You are warm." When you are here, the burning stops. I saw the Queen's expression shift. It was subtle, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible softening around her mouth. For all her power, she was also a mother watching her traumatized daughter reach for help. "Your Majesty," I said carefully, "I don't know what I can offer. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a diplomatic officer who happened to be in the right place 3 years ago." "You are the one who saved her life," the Queen said. "You are the one her mind has clung to as a symbol of safety. Our physicians have tried everything. Perhaps what my daughter needs is not medicine, but connection." The child tugged on my hand. "Stay for dinner." "Please, just dinner." It was such a simple request, so human in its innocence, that I found myself nodding before I could think through the political implications. "Just dinner," I agreed. The Queen touched a panel on the wall, and somewhere far away I heard systems activating. "I will inform your diplomatic corps that you are detained for questioning," she said. "It will buy us time." "Detained?" The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "It would not do for Earth to know that the Valorian Queen has invited a human captain to dine with her daughter. The political ramifications would be complex. The treaties between Earth and Valor were still fragile. Any hint of favoritism, any suggestion that humans had special access to the royal family, would destabilize the careful balance we'd spent years building. But the child was still holding my hand, and her grip was the only thing that felt real in this moment. Dinner was served in a private chamber adjacent to the medical bay. The room was smaller than I expected, almost intimate, with walls that glowed with soft amber light. The table was low, designed for Valorian anatomy, and I sat awkwardly on a cushion that adjusted itself to my human proportions with unsettling intelligence. The child, I still didn't know her name, sat directly across from me. She hadn't let go of my hand except to allow servants to serve the food, and even then she kept her eyes locked on me as though I might vanish if she looked away. The Queen sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. But I noticed she watched her daughter with an intensity that had nothing to do with royal dignity and everything to do with desperate hope. "We have not been properly introduced," the Queen said as crystalline plates were set before us. "I am Thesia Val Korath, Queen of Valor and First Guardian of the Crystal Throne." "Captain Marcus Webb," I replied, feeling absurd. She knew who I was. But protocol demanded the exchange. "And this," Thesia said, gesturing to her daughter, "is Lyra Val Korath, Princess of Valor and heir to the Crystal Throne." She was too busy examining the food, her small face scrunched in concentration. "This is safe?" she asked me. "The food? I'm sure it's—" "This. Being here. Being outside the pod." "You feel safer in the medical pod?" She nodded, a small, jerky motion. "Nothing can get in. The pod is contained." Thesia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "The physicians recommended gradual exposure to open spaces," she said quietly, "but every attempt has resulted in severe anxiety attacks." I looked at Lyra, at the way she held herself rigid, at how her free hand gripped the edge of the table hard enough to make her knuckles pale. "Do you want to go back to the pod?" I asked her directly. "No." The answer was immediate. "But I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" "That it will happen again, the fire, the breaking, the sounds people make when they're dying." I kept my voice gentle. "Nothing is breaking right now. No fire. Just us, eating dinner." "Can you hear anything that sounds dangerous?" Lyra tilted her head, listening. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of environmental systems. "No," she admitted. "Can you see anything that looks like it might hurt you?" "No." "Then right now, in this exact moment, you're safe. Maybe in 5 minutes you won't feel safe. Maybe in an hour. But right now, you are. Can you try to stay in right now instead of then?" She considered this with the gravity of someone much older.
That's hard. But you're already doing it. You left the pot.
"You're sitting here. You're being brave again. I don't feel brave. You wouldn't feel scared if you weren't being brave. Brave isn't the same as not scared. Brave is being scared and doing the thing anyway." Lyra's grip on my hand loosened slightly. She picked up a piece of food with her other hand, something that looked like crystallized fruit, and bit into it cautiously. The crunch was loud in the quiet room. "It tastes good," she said, surprised. "I'm glad. I tried my own food. It tasted like starfruit and lightning." My face must have shown my surprise because Lyra made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You look funny," she said. "I've never had Valorian food before." "It's intense. Everything is intense for humans," Mother says. Your senses are dull, so you make everything stronger to compensate. I glanced at Thessia, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. A gross oversimplification, she said, though not entirely inaccurate. Lyra gradually relaxed, her shoulders dropping, her breathing evening out. She started asking questions, small ones at first. What did Earth look like? Did humans really live on a planet with water oceans? Was it true that human children played in dirt? I answered each question, keeping my tone light, turning the conversation into a game. For every question she asked me, I asked her one in return. What was her favorite color? Did Valorian children have toys? What did the crystal throne look like? Thessia watched us both, saying little, but I saw her posture gradually soften. The queen was receding, and the mother was emerging. Captain Webb, Thessia said eventually, you have a gift. I'm just talking to her. Not a princess, not a victim, simply our physicians, our counselors, our experts. They all approach her with such careful professionalism that they forget she is 5 years old and frightened. Maybe because I'm not trying to fix her, I said. I'm just trying to have dinner with her. Fix me? Lyra looked between us, confused. The doctors want to make your fear go away, I explained. But fear isn't always something that needs to be fixed. Sometimes it's something that needs to be understood. I don't understand my fear. Understanding takes time. For now, you just need to know that being afraid doesn't make you broken. Lyra set down her food. Everyone treats me like I'm broken. Then everyone is wrong, I said firmly. You survived something terrible. Your body healed, but your mind is still healing. That's not broken. That's just still in progress. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, will you come back tomorrow? The question landed like a physical weight. I looked at Thessia, who met my gaze with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was hope there, yes, but also something else. Calculation? Concern? Captain Webb has duties, Thessia said carefully. We cannot monopolize his time. Please. Lyra's voice was small. Just one more day. I should have said no. Should have maintained professional boundaries, considered the political implications, thought about the message it would send if a human officer became personally involved with the Valorian royal family, but I looked at this small, scared child who had spent 3 years trapped in medical stasis in fear, and I couldn't imagine walking away. One more day, I agreed. Lyra smiled. It was a real smile this time, reaching her silver eyes, transforming her face into something radiant. And Thessia Valkorath, Queen of Valor, looked at me with an expression of such naked gratitude that I had to look away. After dinner, Lyra was returned to the medical bay for observation. She went reluctantly, but without the panic Thessia had quietly warned me to expect. As the medical staff settled her back into the pod, at her own request, I noted, she kept her eyes on me until the gel medium rose to cover her face. Thessia escorted me back through the secure corridors herself, without guards. It was a breach of protocol so severe that I didn't comment on it, afraid that drawing attention might shatter whatever strange truce we'd established. You cannot tell anyone about this, she said when we reached the diplomatic sector. Not your superiors, not your colleagues. No one. I understand. Do you? She turned to face me, and the full weight of her authority pressed down like atmospheric pressure. If Earth discovers that you have personal access to the Heir of Valor, they will exploit it. If the Valorian Council learns that I have shown favoritism to a human, they will use it against me. And if my enemies discover that my daughter's recovery depends on contact with an alien, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. She'll be targeted, I said, ruthlessly. There are factions within Valor that believe my daughter's trauma makes her unfit to rule. They have been lobbying to have her removed from succession. If they learn that her recovery requires unconventional methods, they will use it as evidence of her weakness. Needing help isn't weakness. In Valorian politics, it is. Strength is absolute. Authority is unquestioned. Vulnerability is exploited. Her voice was cold, but I heard the pain beneath it. I am asking you to help my daughter. But I am also asking you to put yourself at considerable risk. What kind of risk? Possibly lives. She met my eyes. There are those who would kill to prevent a human from gaining influence over the next Queen of Valor. Should have backed away from this entire situation and requested immediate transfer back to Earth. Instead, I thought about Lyra's smile, about the way her fear had receded when she touched my scars, about how she'd laughed, actually laughed, when I made a face at the strange food. I'll come back tomorrow, I said. Thesia studied me for a long moment. You are either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. The corner of her mouth quirked. My daughter chose well when her mind latched onto you as her savior. You have the same stubborn disregard for self-preservation. She turned to leave, then paused. Captain Webb, not as a queen but as a mother. Thank you for giving me hope. Then she was gone, melting into shadows that seemed to gather around her like living things. I returned to my quarters in the human diplomatic sector and sat in the dark, staring at my scarred hand. The tissue was raised, still sensitive after 3 years. Sometimes on cold days it ached. A permanent reminder of a choice I'd made in seconds. To go back, to save a child, to risk my life for someone I didn't know. I'd never regretted it. Not once. But I was starting to understand that the consequences of that choice were far from over. My comm device buzzed. A message from the Valorian diplomatic liaison. The Queen has cleared you of any wrongdoing regarding today's security breach. Your sector access has been restored. No further action required. No mention of tomorrow. No mention of Lyra. I pulled up the incident report from 3 years ago. I'd filed it myself along with the rest of my crew. Evacuation of Valorian diplomatic vessel under Crithian attack. All crew members successfully recovered. Mission complete. We'd never mentioned that one of those crew members was the Valorian heir. Never reported the individual rescues, the specific injuries, the choices made in those final seconds before the ship's core breached. I'd thought we were just doing our jobs. Turned out we'd altered the course of interstellar politics. My hand ached. I pressed my thumb against the scarred tissue, feeling the familiar tightness, the phantom heat of metal that had cooled 3 years ago. Tomorrow I would go back. I would have dinner with a traumatized princess and her desperate mother. I would risk my career, possibly my life, because a scared child needed someone who didn't treat her like she was broken. The logical part of my mind screamed warnings. The diplomatic part calculated political ramifications. The survival-oriented part remembered Thesia's words about people who would kill to prevent human influence. But the part of me that had pulled burning metal aside with my bare hands, the part that had carried a screaming child through a dying ship, the part that couldn't walk away from someone in need, that part was already committed. I set an alarm for early morning and tried to sleep. My dreams were full of fire and small hands gripping mine, of silver eyes wide with trust I hadn't earned but had been given anyway. When I woke, my hand was still aching. And somewhere in the Royal Medical Bay, a princess was waiting for warmth in the cold dark. I returned the next morning carrying something I'd spent half the night constructing in the human quarters fabrication lab. It wasn't much. A simple cube made of transparent aluminum, about 6 inches on each side, with a small heating element embedded in the base. Inside the cube was a holographic projector I'd programmed with images of Earth, oceans, forests, cities, children playing in parks. The guards at Medical Bay 7 recognized me this time. They didn't draw weapons, but they didn't step aside either until Thesia's voice came through their comms. Whatever she said made them move with the synchronized precision of a choreographed dance. Lyra was awake when I entered, sitting in the pod with the gel medium drained to her waist. She brightened when she saw me, and the medical monitors around her pod registered an immediate spike in positive neural activity. "You came back," she said. "I promised I would." I approached the pod and held up the cube. "I made you something." "What is it?" "A window." "Sort of." I activated the holographic projector, and the interior of the cube bloomed with images of Earth. A beach at sunset, waves rolling in gentle rhythm, children building castles in the sand, gulls wheeling overhead. I thought maybe if you could see what Earth looks like, it wouldn't seem so strange when I talk about it. The medical pod's barrier slid open automatically, responding to her desire to get closer. She climbed out. Something Thesia had told me yesterday took hours of coaxing, and walked right up to the cube, her medical gown trailing. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Is that really what your world looks like?" "Earth has a lot of different places. This is a beach. The sand is warm and the water is cold, and children like to dig holes and build things. Because when you're playing, you forget to be scared." She touched the cube gently, and the heating element warmed the transparent aluminum to approximately human body temperature. Her eyes widened. "It's warm, like you. When you're in the pod and you're scared, you can hold this and remember that warmth exists, that somewhere children are playing on beaches, that the burning stopped and safe things came after." Lyra picked up the cube with both hands, cradling it against her chest. The hologram painted her blue skin with golden sunset light. "Can I keep it?" "It's yours." Then, moving slowly as if afraid I might vanish, she stepped forward and pressed her forehead against my chest. A Valorian gesture of trust and affection I'd only seen in cultural briefings. I froze, uncertain, until I saw Thessia standing in the doorway. She nodded once, permission and encouragement combined. I rested one hand gently on Lyra's head. "You're welcome, Princess. Just Lyra," she said against my shirt. "When it's you, just Lyra." Just Lyra. We stood like that for a long moment before she stepped back, still clutching the cube. "Will you have breakfast with me?" "Mother says you can stay longer today if you want." I glanced at Thessia, who had moved into the room silently. "If it's not an imposition," I said. "You are healing my daughter," Thessia said simply. "Nothing else matters." Lunch became dinner. Somewhere in those hours, the medical bay transformed from a cold clinical space into something that felt almost like a home. Lyra showed me her collection of crystal formations, a hobby she developed during her years in stasis. Each crystal was cataloged with precise notes about its origin, composition, and the way light refracted through its structure. "This one is from the northern ice fields," she said, holding up a piece that glowed with inner blue fire. Mother brought it for me when I first woke up. She said it reminded her of courage. Why courage? Because ice looks fragile, but it's actually very strong. It holds shapes that water can't. It endures. She set the crystal down carefully. "Mother says I'm like ice, that I look fragile, but I'm stronger than I think." Your mother is right. I feel cracked. Like if someone touched me too hard, I'd shatter. I picked up one of her crystals, a small clear piece with a visible fracture running through it. "See this crack?" She nodded. "Does it make the crystal weaker?" "The books say yes, structurally compromised." "Look at what the crack does to the light." She held the crystal up, and sunlight from the room's environmental systems poured through it. The fracture split the light into a rainbow, scattering colors across the walls and patterns more complex and beautiful than any flawless crystal could produce. "The crack makes it different," she said slowly. "Not weaker, different. Exactly. What happened to you left cracks, but those cracks don't make you less. They make you someone who understands things that other people don't. Someone who can see beauty in survival." Lyra was quiet for a long time, studying the fractured crystal. Then she set it aside and picked up the cube I'd given her. The hologram had cycled to a forest scene. Tall trees, dappled sunlight, a stream running over smooth stones. "Tell me about Earth forests," she said. So I did. I told her about hiking with my father in the Cascades, about the smell of pine and earth after rain, about deer that would freeze and watch you with liquid eyes before bounding away. I told her about getting lost once as a child, about the fear that had gripped me until I remembered my father's lessons. Stay calm, stay put, wait for help. "Were you scared?" she asked. "Terrified." "But you stayed calm anyway?" "Mostly." I cried a little. But I also remembered that fear is just information. It tells you something might be dangerous, but it doesn't make you helpless. "I cry every night," Lyra admitted. "The doctors say it's trauma response. That I need to process it correctly." "There's no correct way to process fear," I said. "There's just your way. And crying is as valid as any other way." She considered this. Mother never cries. She says queens don't cry because crying is vulnerability and vulnerability is weakness. I glanced at Thesia, who had remained silent during most of the day, observing. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I saw the tightness around her eyes. "I think," I said carefully, "that queens probably cry when no one is watching, because being strong all the time is exhausting, and even queens need to let the pressure out sometimes." "Have you seen Mother cry?" "Once," Thesia said quietly. We both turned to look at her. "Captain Webb saw me cry yesterday when you smiled. I could not help it." "You cried because I smiled?" "I cried because I had not seen you smile in 3 years, because I thought I might never see it again. Because in that moment, I was not a queen. I was only a mother who loved her daughter." Thesia moved closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Vulnerability is not weakness, my star. It is the foundation of strength. I have been wrong to teach you otherwise. But the Council serves at my pleasure, not the reverse. And if they cannot accept that the next Queen of Valor will be someone who understands both strength and vulnerability, then they will learn." Her voice was cold iron wrapped in silk. "You will not hide your scars, Lyra. You will wear them as badges of survival, and anyone who sees them as weakness will answer to me. Lyra looked between us, her silver eyes shining. I don't want to be a queen who can't cry. Then you will be a queen who cries when necessary and rules with clarity regardless, Thesia said. You will be something new, something better than what came before. Because I'm cracked? Because you survived the fire? I said, and came out warm on the other side. Lyra smiled then, and it was like watching ice melt in spring. Slow, inevitable. She held up the cube with the hologram. When I'm queen, I want Earth children to come to Valor. I want them to play on our ice fields and build things in the snow. I want there to be warmth here. Thesia's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite identify. Pride? Fear? Hope? When you are queen, she said, you may make it so. The days blurred together after that. I spent every moment I could with Lyra, watching her gradually emerge from the shell of fear she'd built around herself. She started sleeping outside the medical pod, though she kept it nearby. Visible, accessible, a safety net she needed less and less. She started eating in the royal dining halls instead of isolated chambers. Started walking through the palace gardens with only minimal guard presence. Started asking questions about everything: politics, Earth history, human biology, why birds on Earth sang and Valorian ice wrens didn't. I answered what I could and admitted ignorance when I couldn't. I never lied to her, never patronized her, never treated her as anything other than exactly what she was. A highly intelligent child working through severe trauma with courage that humbled me. The Valorian court noticed, of course. Whispers started circulating about the human who had unusual access to the royal family. My diplomatic corps superiors called me in for questioning, carefully phrased inquiries about my relationship with certain Valorian officials. I have been asked to assist with cultural exchange programs at the request of the royal household. All interactions are supervised and appropriate. Thesia was always present during my time with Lyra, but it wasn't the whole truth either, and my superiors knew it. Captain Webb, Ambassador Ortiz said during one particularly tense debriefing, you understand that we cannot afford any perception of impropriety with the Valorian government. The treaties are still fragile. If there is anything at all that might compromise Earth's position, there isn't, I said firmly. I'm helping a child recover from trauma, that's all. The child is the heir to the Valorian throne. She's also 5 years old and scared. Should I have refused to help? Ortiz sighed. No, but be careful, Marcus. Politics doesn't care about good intentions. He was right, of course, but I was already too deep to turn back. 3 weeks after that first dinner, Lyra asked if she could touch my scars again. We were in the palace gardens, a vast space of crystalline sculptures and ice trees that grew in defiance of thermodynamics. Lyra had been running, something she hadn't done since before the attack, and had collapsed beside me on a bench, breathless and laughing. The cold doesn't bother you at all, does it? I asked. The temperature was well below freezing, and my breath plumed in the air despite the environmental suit I wore. This is warm for us, she said. In summer, we go to the polar regions because the equator gets too hot, almost freezing. We are very different species, but the same in some ways. She held up her hand next to mine. Hers was smaller, blue, with an extra finger. Mine was tan, scarred, unmistakably human. Both touch things. True. Can I touch your scars again? She asked. I've been thinking about them. Of course. I extended my right hand, palm up. She traced the lines of twisted tissue with one finger, following the pattern as she had that first night. You got these saving me? Yes. Do they hurt? Sometimes when it's cold, mostly. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'd do it again. She looked up at me, searching my face. Why? You didn't know me. I was just someone on a ship. You were a child who needed help. That's all that mattered. But you could have died. Seemed like a fair trade. My maybe dying so you definitely wouldn't. She was quiet for a moment, then... Mother says humans are strange because you value individual lives over collective good. That you'll risk everything for one person when the logical choice is to save the many. But it's who we are. I think it's beautiful, Lyra said softly. The way you see every person is worth saving. Valorians calculate value differently. We measure contribution to society, genetic strength, political utility. Individual lives are less important than the continuation of the whole. Is that what you believe? But then I was the individual life that needed saving, and a human decided I was worth the risk. It changed how I see things. She pressed my scarred hand against the scars on her own side. We match now. Both of us are marked by the same fire. We survived the same fire, I corrected gently. The scars are just reminders that we made it through. She smiled. When I'm queen, I'm going to change things. I'm going to make Valorian society more like Earth. More.
That's a big change.
I have time. Queens live a long time. She paused. Will you help me? When I'm queen, will you be my advisor on human things? On warmth? I glanced toward Thessia, who was standing at a distance with her guards, watching. That's a long time away, I said. A lot could change. Promise anyway, Lyra insisted. Promise you'll help me bring warmth to Valor. I promise. She threw her arms around me in a gesture she'd learned from watching human holovids, and I hugged her back, feeling her small form shaking with emotion. Over her head, I saw Thessia watching us. Her expression was complex, grateful, worried, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Later, when Lyra was settled for the night and I was preparing to return to my quarters, Thessia pulled me aside. Walk with me, she said. We moved through the palace corridors in silence, guards maintaining a discreet distance. Finally, we reached a balcony overlooking the capital city, a sprawling metropolis of crystal towers and frozen rivers that glowed with bioluminescent life. She's happy, Thessia said. For the first time since the attack, my daughter is genuinely happy. She's healing. Because of you. Thessia turned to face me. I need you to understand what you've done, Captain Webb. You have given me back my daughter. You have given Valor back its heir. The debt I owe you cannot be calculated. I don't want a debt. Nevertheless, you have one, and I always pay my debts. She paused. There will be a formal ceremony next month. A celebration of Lyra's recovery. The council cannot refuse it without appearing callous. At that ceremony, I intend to publicly acknowledge the human who saved her life. Your Majesty, that's better to control the narrative than let speculation run wild. Her eyes were hard. I will announce that you were part of the rescue operation 3 years ago, that my daughter recognized you, and that her recovery accelerated due to familiar presence. All true, nothing that can be used against us. And the political fallout will be manageable. I am still queen, my word is law. She softened slightly. But I want you to know what you're agreeing to. Once this becomes public, you will be forever connected to the Valorian throne. Earth will watch you. Valor will watch you. And my enemies will see you as a potential weakness to exploit. I understand. Do you? Do you truly understand that your life is about to become infinitely more complicated? I thought about Lyra's smile, about the way her fear had receded, about the promise I'd made to help her bring warmth to a cold empire. Yes, I said. I understand, and I'm still in. Then she did something I never expected. She reached out and placed her hand over my scarred palm, the same gesture her daughter had made. Then we are bound, she said formally. You who saved my daughter from fire, I who rule in crystal and ice. We are bound by scars and by choice. You are under my protection now, Captain Marcus Webb. And I do not fail to protect what is mine. The weight of those words settled over me like a physical thing. I had just been claimed by the Queen of Valor, protected, but also bound. Thank you, Your Majesty, I said, because there was nothing else to say. She released my hand and stepped back. The ceremony is in 4 weeks. Use the time to prepare, both politically and personally. After this, nothing will be the same. She was right. But as I returned to my quarters that night, my scarred hand still tingling from her touch, I realized I didn't regret any of it. I had pulled a burning child from a dying ship. I had given her warmth when everything was cold. I had helped her remember how to smile. Whatever came next, that was enough. The ceremony was scheduled for the anniversary of Lyra's emergence from medical stasis, a date that had been marked previously as a somber reminder of her continued struggle. Thessia had transformed it into a celebration of recovery, a public display of strength that would reinforce Lyra's position as heir and silence the whispers about her fitness to rule. I spent those 4 weeks in intensive diplomatic briefings. Ambassador Ortiz was furious, then calculating, then resigned to making the best of what he called an unprecedented situation. Earth's government saw opportunity, formal recognition from the Valorian throne, potential trade advantages, improved relations with a species that had remained coldly distant since first contact. They didn't see the danger, or if they did, they considered it acceptable risk. I knew better. I saw the way certain Valorian nobles watched me during preliminary ceremonies. I heard the whispers in corridors that fell silent when I approached. I received 3 separate death threats through anonymous channels, each one more detailed than the last. Thessia's protection was absolute, but it couldn't be everywhere at once. Lyra, meanwhile, was thriving. She had moved out of the medical bay entirely, taking residence in the royal family's private quarters. She attended court functions with increasing confidence, her scars visible and unmarked, a deliberate choice Thessia had encouraged. "Let them see what fire does," Thessia had said coldly to the council when one advisor suggested cosmetic treatments. "Let them remember that my daughter survived what would have killed most of them." No one had argued after that. The night before the ceremony, Lyra came to my quarters in the diplomatic wing. She was accompanied by guards, but she dismissed them with a gesture that was pure royal authority. "I'm scared," she said once we were alone. "Of tomorrow? Of everything?" She sat on one of the human-designed chairs, looking small and lost. "What if I freeze? What if I can't speak? What if everyone sees that I'm still broken?" "You're not broken. I still have nightmares. I still panic in enclosed spaces. Last week I cried for an hour because someone closed a door too quickly and the sound reminded me of whole breaches." Her voice was thick with frustration. "Queens don't cry for an hour because of doors." I sat beside her. "This queen will, and she'll be stronger for it, not weaker." "How can crying make me strong?" "Because you acknowledge the fear instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Because you feel it fully and then move forward anyway. That's real strength, Lyra. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to face it." She leaned against my shoulder, a gesture of trust that still made my chest tight. "Will you be there tomorrow?" "Where I can see you." "Front row. I promise. If I start to panic, look at me. I'll be there. And you'll remember that you've already survived the worst thing. This is just ceremony." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for letting me help." She left shortly after, guards materializing from shadows to escort her back to the royal wing. I watched her go and wondered if I'd done enough to prepare her for what was coming. The ceremony hall was vast, capable of holding 10,000 Valorians. Every seat was filled. The walls were living crystal that resonated with harmonic frequencies, creating a sound like distant music. Light refracted through 1,000 surfaces, turning the entire space into a geometric rainbow. I sat in the front row, wearing formal Terran diplomatic attire that felt stiff and confining. Around me sat Earth's ambassadorial staff, all carefully coached on protocol. Behind us, rows upon rows of Valorian nobility, in their crystalline finery, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The ceremony began with traditional elements, ritual acknowledgments of Valor's ancestors, musical compositions that made my teeth ache, formal presentations of crystalline gifts to the throne. Lyra sat beside her mother on a smaller throne, her posture perfect, her face composed. She looked every inch a princess, but I could see the slight tremor in her hands. The way her eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for threats, the rapid breathing she was trying to hide. She was terrified. Thessia stood, and the entire hall fell silent with a synchronization that spoke to centuries of ingrained protocol. "We gather to celebrate recovery," she said, her voice resonating through the crystal halls, "to honor survival, to acknowledge that strength comes in many forms." She gestured, and Lyra stood on shaking legs. "My daughter Lyra Valkorath stands before you, marked by fire and tempered by survival. 3 years ago she should have died." Many in this room believed she was too damaged to rule, too broken to lead. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Thessia's smile was sharp as broken glass. They were wrong. Lyra stepped forward. I saw her hands clench, saw the way she held herself rigid against panic. Then her eyes found mine, and I nodded once. "You can do this." "I was broken," Lyra said, and her voice carried through the crystalline acoustics with surprising strength. "I spent 3 years afraid of sounds, of touch, of open spaces. I cried every night. I couldn't sleep without sedation. I woke screaming from nightmares that wouldn't end." The crowd was silent. No one had expected this honesty. I was broken, Lyra continued, but I didn't stay broken. With help from my mother, from physicians, from someone who taught me that scars are proof of survival rather than marks of weakness, I learned to heal. The crowd gasped. Scars were typically hidden in Valorian culture, considered shameful reminders of vulnerability. These are my scars, Lyra said. They came from fire and fear and almost dying. I will never hide them. They are part of me now, proof that I survived something terrible and came out stronger. She looked directly at the council members in the front rows. When I am queen, I will rule with the knowledge that strength and vulnerability are not opposites. That being wounded doesn't make you weak, that asking for help is courage, not failure. She gestured toward me. 3 years ago, a human pulled burning metal aside with his bare hands to save my life. Captain Marcus Webb could have escaped that ship, could have saved himself. Instead, he came back for me, a child he'd never met. A species not his own. He came back because he believed one life was worth the risk. I stood, uncertain what was expected. Lyra smiled at me. Captain Webb, Theseus said formally, approached the throne. I walked forward, very aware of 10,000 eyes watching my every movement. I stopped at the base of the throne platform and dropped to one knee, not because protocol required it, but because it felt right. Captain Marcus Webb, Theseus said, you saved my daughter's life 3 years ago. You gave her warmth when everything was cold. You taught her that survival is not the same as living, and that healing is a form of courage. For this, valor owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. She descended from the throne, moving with liquid grace, and held out one hand. I took it uncertain, and she pulled me to my feet. In recognition of your service, Theseus continued, I name you Friend of the Crystal Throne. You will have permanent access to the royal household. Your counsel will be sought on matters of cultural exchange, and you will be under my personal protection as long as you draw breath. She pressed something into my scarred palm. I looked down and saw a small crystal, perfectly clear except for a single fracture running through its center. Light poured through it, scattering into rainbows. This crystal, Theseus said, loud enough for all to hear, is from the royal vaults. It was damaged during the attack that wounded my daughter, cracked by the same fires that marked her. I gift it to you as a symbol of shared survival, of scars that make us different, not weaker, of the bond between valor and earth. She released my hand and turned back to the crowd. Let it be known, Captain Marcus Webb is under my protection. Any who move against him, move against the throne itself. Any who question his presence, question my judgment. And my judgment, her voice dropped to something cold and dangerous, is absolute. The crowd erupted in formal acknowledgement, a sound like wind through ice caves, beautiful and alien. I stood there, holding the fractured crystal, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me. I had been publicly bound to the Valorian throne, protected, honored, targeted. But when I looked at Lyra, saw her standing tall and proud with her scars visible and her fear controlled, I knew it was worth it. After the ceremony, there was a formal reception that lasted hours. I was pulled into a dozen different conversations, fielded questions from curious nobles, and deflected 3 separate attempts by Earth diplomats to debrief me immediately. Through it all, I kept one eye on Lyra. She moved through the crowd with increasing confidence, speaking with nobles who had once dismissed her as too damaged to lead. I saw the way they looked at her differently now, with respect instead of pity, with acknowledgement instead of dismissal. She had transformed her vulnerability into strength in front of the entire court, and they couldn't look away. Late in the evening, when the reception was finally winding down, Lyra found me on one of the observation balconies. She was exhausted. I could see it in the set of her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands, but she was smiling. I did it, she said. You did more than that. You changed how they see you. Because I could look at you and remember that I'm stronger than I think. You would have been fine without me, but I'm glad I didn't have to be. She held up her hand and I took it. Her skin was cold against mine, but her grip was steady. You kept your promise. You helped me bring warmth to valor. That was all you. You and me and Mother. All of us together. She squeezed my hand once, then released it. I should go. Mother says I need to rest before the council meeting tomorrow. They're going to question my speech.
Let them question.
You spoke truth. I spoke warmth, she corrected. And warmth is dangerous here. But I'm not afraid anymore. Or I am, but I'm not letting fear stop me. She turned to leave, then paused. Marcus, It was the first time she'd used my first name. Yes? Thank you for pulling burning metal aside. For coming back. For all of it. Anytime, Princess. Anytime. She smiled and disappeared into the palace, leaving me alone with the fractured crystal still warm in my palm. I stood there for a long time, looking out over the crystal city, thinking about fires and scars and small hands reaching for warmth in the dark. Somewhere in the palace, political wheels were turning. Allies and enemies were calculating how to use this new dynamic. Earth and Valor were both trying to figure out what it meant that a human captain had been named Friend of the Crystal Throne. But in that moment, none of it mattered. A scared child had learned to smile again. A traumatized princess had found the courage to show her scars. A cold empire had been given a glimpse of warmth. And I had been there to see it happen. My hand ached, the phantom pain of old burns flaring in the evening cold. I pressed my thumb against the scarred tissue and thought about choices made in seconds that echo for years. 3 years ago, I'd gone back for a child in a burning ship. Today, I'd watch that child stand before 10,000 people and choose courage over fear. Tomorrow, there would be consequences, political maneuvering, threats and opportunities in equal measure. But tonight, I held a fractured crystal that scattered light into rainbows, and I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it cost me everything. Especially because it had cost me something. Because that's what warmth does. It burns, but it also heals. And sometimes the burn is worth it.